Okay, greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to the next episode of the Galactic Visitor Center. We are very honored today to have Kosta with us, along with myself and Marcellus. And really, we just want to say a big thank you to Kosta for coming on with us. And we want to get right into it. Like, what got you interested in this topic? Any event, or just a general interest in knowing what is out there? What brought you into this world?
Well, like many people in the community that I founded, which is ET Let's Talk, and it means just what it says, ET Let's Talk. And I will talk more about that as we go along. That just didn't spring up out of nowhere, but reverse the remote back many, many years when I was younger, growing up in the Midwest. I picked up my first UFO book from a drugstore, and it was like a classic set of pictures. Back then, before you could really doctor pictures, there wasn't Photoshop or computers or anything, but there were all these beautiful pictures and stories about encounters with UFOs, and I was just gobsmacked with that. Just looking at the pictures, I just felt like a tug. The classic pictures of a dome and a disc-shaped object and stuff. So I was hooked then, and I have to say that I already was, back in the early 60s, was a NASA geek, regardless of what you think about NASA, and there's people who will go off into a lot of controversy about that now.
Sure. Of course.
Back then, man, the Mercury program, the Gemini, Apollo, just enthralled and entranced the whole world. And I do believe, and my wife says this too, because she's one of these people, she says a whole generation of engineers was created by those of us who were really turned on by the outreach we were doing in space.
Sure.
Programs. So I was affected by all that. I read a lot of science fiction. I had a telescope. I was out in my Indiana backyard a lot, teaching myself astronomy. So that was the stage for me to pick up the first book on UFOs. And like I said, I was smitten. Fast forward many years later to 2006, and I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I went to a first time ever gathering of people who claimed that they could contact UFOs through meditation and using protocols. And I thought to myself, man, I want to do this. I had been surfing the internet, just going, I wonder what's going on with the UFO field. I haven't touched that in decades, because what I did was I had kind of a normal life. Went to college, got a degree in computer science and a minor in math, and came out here to the Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I had a career as a an independent software consultant until I retired almost 40 years later. So that was the background when in 2006, I just put UFO into the Google search bar. And as you can imagine, 40 million hits.
Yeah.
So, okay, where do I start? This is one big fire hose. But I did discover this group of people who, 4 hours from where I am right now by car, Mount Shasta, California, Northern California, this group was gathering for 6 days and nights to sit under the stars, meditate together, and they claimed that they could contact the beings in these UFOs. At that point, I mean, I'm all over that, because I already believe they're here and have been. And I grew up with friends and family telling me stories, literally, of discs flying over their car, the engine stopping, a light beaming down, rotating lights underneath, and then zipping off. That happened to people I know and who I trusted over those years.
Oh, wow.
So I was really primed to want to go out and try my own like that. So I did. And during that week, I had 3 experiences that just changed my life. And that's why we're talking right now, because along the way, after those experiences, I created the ET Let's Talk community, the People's Disclosure Movement. And by the way, the People's Disclosure Movement, and we'll talk more about that too, is 1 million people or more now across the planet.
Wow.
And my star friends, and I do have star friends, have told me that our movement of making this contact now is a snowball rolling downhill that can't be stopped. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, and get your head around what that means. And again, I'll talk more about that. But those 3 experiences it would take a couple more hours to describe them in total, so I will try to summarize. Uh,
Yeah.
in fact, I've got a picture of one of them, but I don't know this
Oh my God.
platform well enough to know if I can share.
Yeah.
No,
Well, you know what? Just send it to me and I can splice it in while we're talking about it in post. So yeah, that would be amazing to have a visual. Um,
Okay.
what
yeah.
I was gonna say is, see, I would represent kind of the skeptical half of this show. I, as much as a believer I am, I'm just, my first thought is always, I don't know. But what would really makes me latch onto your story is the fact that, one, you say you have a background in computer science and mathematics. So that, to me, science, you are very science based, you're logical based. So I know I'm dealing with a very straight shooter here. So that really makes me say, wow, okay, now I'm really interested in what this guy's seen, because it's, it's just like when you have pilots and stuff give these
Yeah.
accounts. It's like, it's hard to refute. It's not just some guy, and I hate to disparage any part of the country, but it's just some uneducated person sitting, in their backyard, who maybe had a little too much to drink. So
Yeah, there's something to be said about mastering the pragmatic before you tackle the ethereal, right? Like
I like that.
that's hard because it's like you've proven that you have the discipline and the
mhm,
aptitude to be the, in the box, and now I want to break out of the box.
right.
That's well put. I may steal that from you, so please
Yeah, oh, please
don't
do,
sue
please
me
do.
when I try that.
No,
Well,
no, we
to your
like that.
to your point, Marcellus, I will give you the story, the two stories of what happened that week that were that profound that they changed my life. Um, like I said, I was already a believer because of secondhand stories of people I knew and trusted,
Mhm.
good friends and family, and I didn't, and they weren't drinking, they weren't on drugs, whatever. They had those, but there's nothing like having your own. And during that week at Mount Shasta, those 6 nights, I had my own experience. And when that happens to you, it changes you forever. I mean, you
Mhm.
either uh, stuff it and say, I can't talk to anyone about this. So you hold it in. And there's a lot of people in the ET Let's Talk community who come to me and say, I am so glad I found this community. I can finally talk about this. My partner would think I'm crazy. My boss would fire me. They would institutionalize me. All that stuff has happened. And I know people that's happened to. But I had that experience. So here's what happened. One of the nights after our group had been out in the field and with Mount Shasta majestically in the background, we'd had an evening of seeing anomalous lights in the sky, and we learned how to identify what are aircraft, what are stars, what are planets, all the known stuff. Because
Mhm.
to your point, Marcellus, I'm scientifically based, and I want to sit there and eliminate everything that I
Right.
know,
Right.
so that what's left over is something that really excites me, because it's something that's mysterious and yet to be known.
Mhm.
So we had learned all week how to eliminate all that. We had our satellite charts and all that, but we were still watching flashing lights that would respond to the lights we flashed in sequence, change direction, change luminosity, all during
Wow.
the week.
Wow.
40 of us. So one night after the group broke up, about 10 of us stood around in this clearing, surrounded by some forest where we had been meeting, just talking about what happened during the night. Someone
Mhm.
tugged on my sleeve and pointed off to my right, maybe 6, maybe 8 feet, not far away. And I looked, and I had to rub my eyes and make sure it wasn't what little was left of the setting moonlight and shadows and foliage and stuff, so that it wasn't that, and it wasn't.
Mm.
But what I saw was a 3-foot diameter sphere slowly materializing, just kind of coming on, getting
Mm.
little bit more distinct and definite. And it was opaque, couldn't see through it, kind of grayish, and it was floating above the ground a few inches. Um, it was never really completely solid. I actually thought I could have walked over and touched it.
Mm.
And I said, but part of me said, man, you don't know what you're dealing with.
Right.
No, don't do that.
Right.
It might
So
be like radiation or something. Yeah, yeah,
might be. Well, as we
yeah.
found out after this encounter, there were radiation burns on a couple of people's faces. Not enough to harm them, but just
Oh, wow.
that did
Like a
happen. And this was
sunburn or
midnight.
something.
This was midnight. This was not
Yeah,
a bad suntan, right?
yeah.
But in that moment, all of us watched it floating there without noise, without wind or vibration or anything. And we're going, WTF, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
One of the guys in the circle spoke up and said, wait a minute, I just got like a telepathic message from the beings who are inside of this thing. And what they tell me is that they're scientists and they're here to study the human energy system.
Hmm.
And we're going, wow. And I'm going, how cool.
Right.
I'm a scientist too. And so this is what humans do. Why won't other species do that? They're here studying
Exactly.
the local life forms. So I go, that makes sense. You know, it's not cattle mutilations and not this, that. They're researching. We are somebody's PhD thesis.
Exactly.
We're the rats in the little lab right now.
Right. Right.
Not to disparage who we are, but you know,
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, somebody's
Yeah.
got to be the rat somewhere.
I like that. And I feel that too.
I think of us more as like the toddlers. Like we're the ones that like we might be playing with matches too early. They come down and say, "Hey, knock that out," you know, or
Oh, there are stories about that too. So to finish that story, what happened was it stayed there for half an hour. Standing next to me was a friend I had made. You make friends because of the really filtered nature of these events. The people that show up here, that come across country, that pay money to sit under the stars of this are not your average types of people. They may have average lives, but they've got this interest. So you make friends and you bond. There was this one woman who was a very good psychic, and I call her Gloria on interviews, not her real name. But she was standing next to me this whole half hour while this thing was floating there, and we're just kind of hushed and talking among ourselves. And she was standing there with her arms out like this, straight as a board, not moving. And I looked over and I go, something's up with Gloria. I'm not going to interrupt it because I don't know what it is, but I'm going to stay here in case she shows any signs of distress. I'll be right here. Near the end of the half hour, she kind of got a little bit woozy. And I steadied her by the shoulders and I asked her, how many fingers? You know where you are? What's your name? And she says, you know, I'm okay. I'm disoriented. And the next thing I asked is, what happened? And she said, well, I was approached telepathically by one of the beings inside here and inside this thing that's still floating there. And they asked me if they could merge with me and test an experiment with my energy body. And I'm just, my jaw's like hanging open at this. And I'm going, man, a lot of us would have just had our hair on fire and running for the cars. But that's merge with me. I don't think so.
You want to do what with what?
Yeah, oh, it gets better. Yeah. The presence of mind that Gloria had, not only did she say, yes, you may, but I have 3 conditions. She negotiated.
Wow.
You know, it was all going on silently while she was standing there, not making a sound to us, but it was going on. She said, I have 3 conditions. One, I remain conscious of where I am. I don't want to be like knocked out, don't know my surroundings. And the being said, okay. And she said, number 2, you leave when I tell you to leave. When I say time to unmerge, go. And the being said, okay. And finally, her 3rd condition was no messing with the sex equipment. I don't want any probes or messing around.
Fair.
And she said that in all seriousness, you know, not to be flippant or anything. And the being said, okay. So at the end of that half hour, when she got woozy, that's when she told the being, you leave. And suddenly, as she's finishing her story, that little sphere, that 3-foot diameter, which, by the way, a lot of us believe, and we had some indication it was part of a larger craft that was interdimensional and was only showing part of this. But whatever it is, we all saw the 3-foot sphere, and we all got these messages, and these things happened to my friends. And it started dematerializing at that point, slowly fading out into the background. Then it was just gone as noiselessly and as really undramatically. It left the way that it came. And so you're sitting there going, what just happened? You know? And you were talking earlier, Michael, about how being pragmatic and inside a box, that was me inside the box. At that moment, the box went, boing!
Bye box.
I kind of jumped out and looked around and I go, okay, this is outside the box. I just had my own experience, not secondhand of someone I believe. This happened to me and a bunch of other people. It wasn't a mass delusion. So what am I going to do with this? Because all the physics I knew said what I just saw should not have happened. There must be something we don't know. And I want more of it. And at that point, I vowed to myself I would get on social media as an organizer and find other people around the world and get them to do these meditation protocols, close encounters of the fifth kind, human, interactive, and do it on a regular basis. And that's how the People's Disclosure Movement was born, where we take the power back from authorities who are constantly telling us what to see and what to believe, right? Even though
Right.
we know with our own eyes and ears what we saw, and they're telling us, nah, that
They're
wasn't
trying-
that. Go
to
home.
shape,
Nothing to see
shape
here.
your own, trying to shape your reality.
So I do want to talk a lot about that, and maybe that'll be our part 2. But one of the things that you said that's really interesting is you believe that sphere was a portion of the rest of this interdimensional ship. So kind of almost like a portal or a bridge into our 3D that manifested as a sphere. I don't know if you probably are aware of this, but a lot of the interdimensional ships that people encounter are spherical. And it's thought that because they are in this higher dimensionality, when they break into our physical space, that is just how it appears.
Yeah.
And that I find very interesting, because it's like they don't necessarily, they aren't constrained as time being linear. So like they come in this like form that embodies all probability for that object, and that happens to be a sphere. That like all probabilities at once is a sphere for that, whatever that apparatus is. I find that super fascinating.
I've never heard of that description of it as a sphere, but the mathematician inside me wants to start creating formulas and going, yes,
Yeah.
the sphere is the perfect formula for doing that thing. And I don't have the kind of smarts to do that, but I hear what you're saying, and why not? What we three are doing now, and which the audience is doing with us, is there are these invisible waves that are being transmitted at the speed of light all over the earth, so that they're forming images in a reality that our senses can pick up. So 100 years ago, 200 years ago, this would have been the stuff of magic.
Yeah.
They were burning people at the stake 400 years ago for talking about stuff like this. So my point is, we think we know all the physics we know, and I know what I experienced during that half hour violated those. So if it was possible for one thing to one, who am I? I'm an ordinary person. To one random guy this happened to, or 9, 10 random people. If it can happen once to all of us, then it can happen to anyone, anywhere. It broke the mold. That box came open. We peeked outside and we said, oh, the universe is a little bit bigger. We maybe can't explain it. Maybe we can't duplicate that. Depending on who you talk to, maybe we have. But it set you on a new course. And like I said, that changed my life. I want to relate one other story that'll give you maybe something to talk about that happens during that same week that was just as profound. Before I left for this 6 days of doing this contact with this group of people, I said to my wife, hey, would you like to come with me? I know you're not into the UFO thing, but this might be fun. It's something to explore, something new. And she said, no. She says, I've got businesses to run. She's an entrepreneur. She says, I'm way busy. I do believe there's cosmic life. I do believe they're here. I'm with you on that. But I don't see what it has to do with my daily life. I've got businesses to run. So she said, go with my blessing, which actually doesn't happen with a lot of partners, by the way. Maybe more and more as time has gone on. But that allowed me the freedom. And she said, go have fun. So during the week, I was calling her up every morning and talking her ear off about what we had done last night as a group out there at Mount Shasta. All the lights we were seeing, orbs in trees, messages we were getting, all new. And about the fourth morning, she stops me just as I started talking about what I'd seen the night before. And she says, wait a minute, I've got some news for you. I go, what could be cooler than what I saw last night? But go ahead, little. No, I'm just, if I ever tried to say that, that wouldn't go over big. No, I'm just being a little bit flippant here. But no, I basically thought, okay, this has got to be good, because she knows me and she knew what I'd been talking about. I go, if she's stopping me now, I'm all ears. And she had just gone to bed the night before in our bedroom, turned out the light, was kind of settling down on her pillow. And she sees very well in the dark. So it was dark, but she's like a bat. And even though she's clairvoyant and has an inner sight, she's a professional psychic for 30 years. What I'm about to describe was not with her psychic vision. She says her eyes were wide open. It was her normal vision. And in the dark there at the foot of our bed, suddenly there were 4, maybe 5 translucent figures, beings standing there looking at her. They were 3-ish feet tall, 3.5 feet, large heads, big almond eyes, not much in the way of features here, maybe a small mouth, bipedal. There was a neck. She saw shoulders and arms and a torso, but the edge of the bed was hiding what probably was their legs. So she knew they were physical enough that the 3D bed, our bed, was hiding them. So it wasn't like they were totally an illusion transposed upon our reality. They were enough into our reality that they could be hidden at the lower part. But anyway, they were sitting there looking at her, big eyes, and she felt these waves of love coming off of them. So she, as she tells the story, it's that she says, who can be afraid of that much love? She says, I was shocked, I was speechless, but I wasn't fearful. It was just love. And she heard in her mind telepathically in this kind of sing-song mode, who are you? To this day, we speculate that they followed my energy from up in Mount Shasta because she and I were closely connected. We were talking. They must have followed my heart energy or something energetic, thinking, wow, this is kind of interesting. Wonder where it goes. And it went to her bedroom here, 4 hours away.
Wow.
And she said she sat there kind of dumbstruck. They said, who are you? And she eventually thought to herself, I should ask them something. And so she just kind of thought with her mind, where are you from? To this day, she stresses that she would rather have asked them, how'd you get here?
Yeah, that's a good question.
She's a Princeton engineer and a Harvard MBA, a very grounded business engineering kind of person who went to school with a lot of brilliant engineers. And they would have wanted to know, how'd you get here? Give me the formulas, just please, or something. No, but she asked them, where are you from? And in her mind again, in the same sing-song fashion, the words were Arcturus. So even though my wife was a NASA geek when she was a kid too, she wasn't that much into astronomy per se, or science fiction or imaginative things. So the fact that this happened to her was way out of her reality. She was not like me, who was reading fantasy and science fiction, watching movies and waiting for the day when I could see fantastic visions and things. Not her, but here it was in front of her. And she says to me, yeah, they said Arcturus and then they faded away. And she asks me, Kosta, is Arcturus a place? And I go, oh, yeah. It's a hyper red giant in the constellation Butes. I'm mispronouncing the Latin, I think. But it's a real thing. It's astronomy 101. It's a real place.
Yep.
And isn't the constellation Butes, hasn't that been pointed out as being centered around like origins of you? I've heard that constellation in other UFO lore stories.
It's definitely there.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. And there are other constellations mentioned too. Try put the word Pleiadians in there, or Sirius and others, Orion. But anyway, that's my second story. And that she says to me, after I told her that is a real place, and my jaws like hit the ground, like, man, we had a real visitation. This woman has no reason to make this up. And she says to me, next year, now it's personal. Next year, I'm coming with you. And we've been working together in this area now for all those years, and we've had a lot more experiences about as dramatic as that one. But that broke the mold for her out of her box. And wherever I am these days, like on podcasts like this one, I want to thank those little Arcturians, wherever you are, because if they hadn't done that, I would have come home with all these stories and she would have believed me. But like I like to say in the People's Disclosure Movement, by making our own contact, we go from being believers into being knowers. And there's nothing more powerful than internalizing and knowing what you saw and not letting someone else talk you out of it. So she became a knower the way I had become, and the rest is our history.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm also sensing some congruence with the conversation that we had with Gracie Marcellus about the leaving of the age of Pisces and into Aquarius, where
Yeah. Well,
age of Pisces is about believing, age of Aquarius is about knowing.
well,
So
and
that's very interesting.
I had a well again, and that brings up the question: are you aware of this? What we were saying earlier about how humans were kind of the younger generation were in this stage of kind of just knowing this stuff where it's not this speculation. It's no, we know there's life. So, do you think that has anything to do with what they call this grand procession that the galaxy goes through, that the Earth goes through, like every, I believe it's
Hmm.
200 something thousand years, because of the axis of the Earth. Um, it wobbles, and when it rotates the entire galaxy, it makes all of the constellations look different, and that's basically how they all the Mayans knew about it. It's how they calculate these ages, and it's like every
Hmm.
200 and something thousand years, and they think that we are now in the stage of this the cycle of the awakening cycle, and then it will lead to the enlightenment cycle, where then we kind of reach this maybe these we become these beings who can teleport intergalactically and
Oh,
interdimensionally.
that's yeah, I do believe that. And people give it different labels. They have different stretches of time. But I will just say that we are in a time of transition.
Join us on our next episode where we continue our conversation with Kosta Macris, discuss yuga cycles and synchronicities, what disclosure actually means to the people of Earth, and whether or not we're ready for it.